Hey, I'm Pastor Robert. Welcome to Riverside Friends Church. We're going to continue our look at the Gospel of Luke. We're going to be in Luke chapter 11. And to start with, I want to ask, have you ever seen those photos of the Instagram versus reality, where somebody posts a photo that's perfectly curated for Instagram, and then they maybe they do a different camera angle just after that photo's taken, when the model relaxes a bit. And in the Instagram photo, you see someone sitting there in a beautiful sunlit bed, a perfect latte, and a journal, and it looks serene. And it looks so peaceful. But then the camera pans out, that second photo appears, and you see the rest of the room it's very normal. There's a laundry pile, there's old pizza boxes, there's just the accumulated stuff. And what's happened is they've cleared just the perfect camera angle to make it look perfect for the camera. And that's all that you're shown. It's that Instagram versus reality. And we do that with our lives, don't we? We all put our best foot forward. We put on the shiny wrapper when we show up to church, and we know when to say amen, and we act like we have it all together. But inside there's a lot of mess that we don't want anyone to see. The anger, the greed, the loneliness, the fear. And we're great at cleaning up the outside of the cup, but we're terrified of what's at the bottom of it. And today, Jesus is going to walk right into a dinner party, and he's going to start peeling back those wrappers that people have, that we have. And today, we're in Luke chapter 11. And to understand what's happening, you have to know that Jesus was a hot ticket guest. Everybody wanted to hear Jesus talk. And so now a Pharisee, a very religious leader, has invited Jesus over for dinner. And it goes very badly. Here's verses 37 to 44 of Luke chapter 11. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So he went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not first wash before the meal. And then the Lord said to him, "Now then, you Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people, did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now, as for what is inside you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God a tenth of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. Woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves which people walk over without knowing it." So here's what happens in the text. Jesus sits down to eat, but he doesn't wash his hands. And now this isn't about germs. This is about a ceremonial hand washing. There's no law in the Old Testament that said you had to do this. It was a man-made tradition. And Jesus refuses to play along, and the Pharisee is shocked. And Jesus uses this moment to make a piercing point. You Pharisees, you clean the outside of the cup, but inside you are full of greed and wickedness. So this is my first point. Real faith is inward. See, part of their wickedness, part of the Pharisees' wickedness was their obsession with the minutiae. It's like they were taking tweezers to the mint plant on their windowsills to give exactly 1/10 to God. But in their concern for the little things, they completely ignored justice and loving people. They loved the best seats in the church and the fancy titles in the marketplace. They loved it when people would say their names and call out to them. And they were incredibly faithful. But they were faithful to their traditions and not to God. Their faithfulness was their undoing. See, the Pharisees, they were undone by their faithfulness because it shifted away from God and to the things that they were doing. And I think as a church, as Christians, as people, we have to guard against this, because it's so easy to get caught up in the minutia of doing church things that we miss what God is actually doing. And when our focus moves from God to the things we do for God, those things they become idols in our lives. And the hardest idol to recognize, I think, is the idol of ministry. It's this thing that we tell ourselves, I'm doing this for God. And at the same time, we forget about justice and loving God because we've become so focused on this. That's what's happening with the Pharisees. It's like, think about a coffee cup, like a travel mug. And on the outside, it looks awesome. And maybe you've got like a cool Riverside Friends Church sticker on it. And it's a great color. It's brand new. It looks beautiful, your coffee cup. Have you ever forgotten your coffee cup in the car for 3 weeks with a little bit of latte left in the bottom? And you open it up and it's a science experiment. It's fuzzy, it's green, and it smells like a swamp. And you can scrub the outside with soap and water all day long. But if you don't clean the inside, you're going to get sick the moment you take a drink. And I think our faith is the same way. We can't just be cleaned up on the outside. Because if on the outside it looks like we're really faithful and we're really trying to do these things for God, but on the inside, like our focus is just on this and not on God, we'll have messed up. And that's what Jesus is saying, I didn't just make your skin and your Sunday clothes, I made your heart. And if the heart isn't clean, then nothing's clean. And in our Friends tradition, we believe that Jesus is the inward teacher, that he is present right now, looking past your stickers and your shiny wrappers. And so stop trying to impress God with your minutiae, those little things that you do, like how many verses you memorize or the faithfulness of the ministry or how long you've kept a ministry going. None of that matters. Because if you aren't letting God change your heart, if you aren't letting God change how you interact with that ministry, if you aren't letting God change the people that you minister to, if God hasn't changed those things, then God hasn't changed your heart. So this week, when you feel you're performing to look like a good Christian, stop, sit in the silence, ask Jesus, what's inside of my cup right now? What's inside of my heart? And let him clean that. And I want to give you a moment to notice your reaction. When I ask, what's inside your cup? What's the inside of your cup look like? What does your cup look like inside? What's the immediate reaction that comes to mind? Because that might be true. Write that reaction down. Take it to a friend. If you're using the app to fill in the blanks, you can share your notes with somebody else. Maybe think about sharing that with a trusted friend to go, hey, here's what I think is maybe inside my cup. What do you think? Do you see that in me? Because Jesus wants to clean your life. Let's move on. Jesus has said some hard things to these Pharisees. And now an expert in the law, a lawyer, stands up to argue. And let's hear what Jesus has to say to him. This is the next set of verses, verse 45 to 52. One of the experts in the law answered him, "Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also." And Jesus replied, "And you, experts in the law, woe to you because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. Woe to you because you build tombs for the prophets. It was your ancestors who killed them. So you testify. You approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and others they will persecute. Therefore, since this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary, yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Woe. Woe to you, experts in the law, because you have taken away the key of knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who were entering. So what's happened here in this text? This lawyer says, hey, Jesus, when you talk about this Pharisee this way, you insult us too. And Jesus essentially replies, yeah, I know. Let me tell you about you. And these lawyers, they weren't courtroom attorneys like we think of lawyers. They were experts who studied the Old Testament law. And Jesus gives them woes as well. And so when Jesus says woe, it's not just anger. It's an expression of deep grief. He is mourning. When Jesus says woe to the Pharisees, when he says woe to these lawyers, he is mourning how they treat people. He calls them out for loading people down with heavy religious burdens and for honoring dead prophets while ignoring living ones. So think about this, right? This is a real example of what would happen. On the Sabbath, the lawyers, the experts in the law said that you could carry a burden. And they never specified what a burden was. You could carry a burden using the back of your hand or the hem of your shirt, but not the palm of your hand or your shoulder or your arm. And so then what's happening? It's super convoluted as to what you could and couldn't do. And as the experts, they could argue with anybody about what it meant so that they could get away with anything. They could do just about whatever they wanted, and they did. But then they would also, if they saw somebody they didn't like, if they saw somebody doing something they didn't like, they could go, wait a minute, that's a burden and you're carrying it wrong. You're breaking the law. And they could hold somebody accountable for things that they could get away with. They're hypocrites. And Jesus sees this as a tragedy that the experts, the lawyers, he calls them out and says, you put this burden on them and you won't lift a single finger to relieve it. But the biggest tragedy is in verse 52. He says, you have taken away the key to knowledge. See, these lawyers were the only ones who could interpret the rules, and they kept the key in their pocket. If you wanted to get to God, you had to go through them. It made the people dependent, and it made the experts feel powerful, and they messed up. And so this is my second point. My first point, real faith is inward. It's about cleaning that inner cup. Second point, real faith is inviting. It's inviting. Unlike the lawyers who burden people, real faith is inviting. It lifts people. It allows them to enter the kingdom. The lawyers close the way for others and themselves. Real faith, though, invites others to come and experience what God has done. So imagine that you've just moved into a brand new neighborhood that has a beautiful community center with a pool and a gym and a library, and you're so excited to use it. But when you get there, the doors are locked. And so you knock on the door, you're looking in, and you see a couple of your new neighbors enjoying the pool, and they look out at you and they say, oh, it's great in here. I can't wait for you to join us. You just have to follow these 400 rules and get a key. And by the way, the rules are written in a language that only we understand. And you'd feel frustrated. You'd feel like they were gatekeepers, keeping the best stuff for themselves. Like you're helping to pay for it, and they're the ones that get to use it. That's exactly what Jesus is saying to these lawyers. They had the key of knowledge, the scriptures, but instead of using it to open the door so everyone could know God's love, they put the key in their pockets and they stood in the doorway. They made themselves the experts so that everyone had to depend on them to get to God. Now here at Riverside Friends Church, we have been through a major change over the last 2 years with Paul and Diane retiring. We used to have a model where leadership depended on just a few people. And thankfully, we've moved away from that. And in a way, it's easy for that model to feel like only a couple of people hold the keys. But as we've moved to a culture of volunteers, we are handing the keys back to the whole church. So if you're a new Christian, I want you to hear this. You don't need to be in a doctoral program to have a relationship with Jesus. He is just as present with you as he is with me or anybody else. We refuse to be a church of gatekeepers. We are a church of door openers. When you serve in a ministry or volunteer, whether it be greeting at the door, making coffee, helping with the kids, whatever it is you're volunteering with, you aren't just helping out. You're proving that the key belongs to the whole community. You are helping others to enter the presence of Christ. When you volunteer or serve, you aren't just helping out a leader or the church. You are helping others to enter the presence of Christ. It's That's why volunteering is so important. And so Jesus has just lambasted these Pharisees and these lawyers. And they're going to respond to it. And we have a choice of how we can respond as well. So this is verse 53 and 54, the last two verses. When Jesus went outside, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely and to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. Now, Jesus has just called out the Pharisees for being too concerned with the minutiae, and the lawyers for being too concerned with their power. And they go off and they oppose Jesus and they plan his downfall and they try to trap him in his words. And we have a choice about how we're going to respond to Jesus. Because there are Pharisees in here. There are Pharisees in our church who are so concerned with the minutiae that you forget how to love people. And we have lawyers here who are so concerned about power and maintaining things that they've done, even when those things hold people from God. We have a choice in how to respond to Jesus. The most faithful of Jesus' day, the religious leaders and the scholars, chose their own idolatry and power over following God. And it would be insane to think that we are not capable of making that same choice. We are no better. I am just as capable at making those same choices, and so are you. And so is every single person in here. There is nobody in here who is not capable of choosing idolatry and power over following Jesus. We are all that way. Jesus called the Pharisees unmarked graves. And in that culture, touching a grave made you unclean. But here is the beauty of the gospel. Jesus touched the unclean, the lepers, the sinners, and even the dead. And instead of him becoming dirty, they became clean and made alive. He isn't afraid of the mess inside of your cup. He wants to reach in and wash it himself. That's who Jesus is. And so this is my third point, that real faith is intentional. It makes an intentional choice to lean in and to recognize I am the worst of sinners. I am more than capable of choosing idolatry and power over following Jesus. And it's intentional to choose Jesus over those things. We have to have both of those. We have to have both that say, I can make that choice, and I do, and Jesus is still accepting me. Have you ever been caught doing something wrong? Maybe scrolling on your phone when you were supposed to be working, and someone called you out. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can get defensive. Why are you always watching me? Everyone else does it. That's what the Pharisees did. That's what the lawyers did. Or you can take a breath. You can drop the act and say, you know what? You're right. I'm struggling with this. The Pharisees and the lawyers, they chose to stay shiny on the outside and rotten on the inside. They chose their power over the presence of God that was standing right in front of them. And today, Jesus is insulting our egos because he wants to save our souls. He is pointing out the dirty cup in our own lives because he wants to fill it with living water. So don't walk out of here and besiege Jesus with excuses. Go to him in prayer. Be brutally honest. Tell him where you are greedy. Tell him where you are proud. Tell him where you are just tired of pretending. Tell him where you have made idols and you've been so focused on the minutia that you forgot to actually follow him in your ministry. Tell him where you've been so focused on the minutia of doing your things that you forgot to love him and you forgot to love God and to bring about justice in the world. See, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, they chose their power and their shiny wrappers over the presence of God standing right in front of them. And we are all capable of making that exact same choice. But here's the beauty of the gospel. Jesus touches those who are unclean and makes them clean. Jesus isn't interested in our Instagram reality or our shiny wrappers. He didn't come to help us look better. Jesus didn't come to make bad people good. Jesus came to make dead people live. He challenged the Pharisees for cleaning the outside while ignoring the heart. And he challenged the experts for making faith a heavy burden instead of an open door. Friends, Jesus is here. He is the immediate presence in this room right now. My charge to you this week is simple. Take off the wrapper. Stop performing. Stop performing your minutiae. Stop performing your power in your school, in your workplace, in your homes, in your church. Be a people who care more about justice and the love of God than about looking perfect. This week, when you catch yourself washing the outside of the cup, defending yourself, trying to look better than you are, trying to make your ministry something it's not, stop. Invite the inward teacher into that space. Let Jesus clean the inside, and you'll find that the outside takes care of itself. Let Jesus clean the inside, you'll find that the outside is going to take care of itself. Amen.